It's the summer of '79, and someone is sexually assaulting young women in a Virginia college town.
We concluded that we had a serial rapist. People were scared to death.
Investigators have little to go on.
We were desperate. We wanted any help we could get.
Under the gun to solve the case, the police turn to a psychic.
This rapist is apologizing to me.
There's obviously some powers at work there.
Oh my gosh, well, what are we into?
Will the psychic help the police to stop a serial rapist before he becomes a serial murderer? Stanton, Virginia, a small, sleepy southern town nestled in the Shenandoah Valley, the birthplace of Woodrow Wilson, the 28th President of the United States.
It was a city of 25,000, but it was sort of caught in time.
But on the evening of March 14th, 1979, Stanton's peace is shattered. A knife-wielding rapist attacks a 22-year-old student in her room at the local college. It is the first in what would be a string of violent sexual assaults.
Stanton Police Department. I just remember getting the call, and the lady was very hysterical and upset, which of course anyone would have been going through that. I just remember how I felt so scared and helpless. My main thing was to try to keep her calm until a police officer could arrive.
Detective Ronnie Wiseman is put on the case.
Our first rape was very unusual because we had very few rapes at all. And this one seemed to be rape from a stranger.
All police have to go on is a composite drawing of the assailant based on the victim's vague description. Then, 2.5 months later, a second rape, only blocks away from the college. Again, few clues for the police.
Person came in a window on each one. He used a knife, and he had a stocking mask on. And so our best description was height and weight, race. That's about it.
Both victims describe their attacker as a large African American. But because of the mask, they can't see his features, and he leaves few clues. Ray Robertson is the prosecutor for the city of Stanton.
Back in 1979, we didn't have DNA evidence. Any foreign hairs, any semen, any saliva, anything like that we found on them, we could get the DNA on that now. We couldn't do that back in 1979, and so it's a very different game when it comes to solving crimes now from what it was back then.
We just had no evidence.
With a violent rapist on the loose, the whole town is on edge.
For something like that to happen around here was a really big deal. That kind of stuff just didn't happen in Stanton. It made me be much more aware. Any place I went, I was always checking, being more cautious.
During that particular time, women were kind of afraid to walk streets at night alone, especially in the college area. All the windows were down and locked.
In a town where serious crime is all but unheard of, the pressure on local police for results is immense.
The community was actually in pretty much of an uproar.
I was following the news in the newspaper daily, especially on this case, because there was so much turmoil. I would say, wow, I don't envy the police officers that's working this case because it's got to be tough.
Everyone that you would come in contact with, regardless of what you were doing, wanted to know how the case was going.
Then, driving by a construction site, the victim of one of the rapes spots the man she thinks attacked her.
One of the victims said, that's him. That's him. There's no question about it.
Police arrest the man, but they soon realize the case against him is flimsy.
The guy wore a stocking mask. How can you make an identification of a suspect that has a stocking mask on?
I think everyone knew that it was not right.
He had been convicted of minor offenses that were very different from the type of offenses that a rapist usually commits, and I really didn't think he had done it.
No sooner is the first suspect released than the other rape victim names a different man. A man she vaguely knows, and he too is arrested.
He actually flunked the polygraph test, so on the basis of the victim identification and the polygraph results, he was arrested.
Everyone seemed to say, oh boy, we got the guy. We can relax a little bit.
But the police don't relax for long. Less than a month later, a third attack, just like the first two. Wearing a stalking mask and wielding a knife, a man climbs through a window and rapes a 32-year-old woman. All this while the investigators' prime suspect is behind bars.
The second person that was arrested was in jail when the third incident happened. Really didn't think we had two people doing these acts.
The suspect is released.
It's very sad. The police were scrambling to get an arrest in the case.
Women were on edge, and we were getting a little frustrated and maybe a little antsy, too, to solve some of these things.
With 3 identical attacks, police believe, unless stopped, the man will almost certainly rape again.
We realized after about 2 or 3, we had a serial rapist. This is something that was very new. We'd never had anything like this.
Under intense pressure, Detective Wiseman calls in Special Agent Darrell Stillwell of the State Police.
You had a person that was operating within about a 5-block area. There were all types of sightings, window peepings, entries into houses, burglaries, thefts of small items.
The perpetrator's rapid escalation from petty burglary to violent rape makes police fear what he'll do next.
The possibility that something will go down, a resistance that will cause a homicide. There's always the possibility of that.
Then, 6 months after the rapes began, a chance event changes the whole course of the investigation. Psychic Noreen Renier arrives in town to give a talk at the local college about ESP and the paranormal.
I had been teaching at Blue Ridge Community College, and at the very end of my lecture, a young lady stood up in the audience and asked me if I would do a public service. I said yes, and she told me that there had been a rapist in the town, and her sister had been one of the victims, and if I could hold her ring and see if I picked up anything.
Noreen uses psychometry, a common psychic technique.
It seems that object has memory or goes beyond memory, and I can see images in my head.
Noreen holds the victim's ring while the student records her response.
And I remember holding it and picking up several pieces of information that came into my mind. She had a tape recorder and was taping it.
Despite knowing nothing about the case, Noreen immediately connects with the horror that is gripping the town.
I felt this small, peaceful, beautiful community was terrorized, certainly the women, because of this rapist attacking again and again.
Noreen also claims to see details of the actual crime.
I remember seeing a stocking mask over.
Desperate to see her sister's attacker brought to justice, the student takes the tape recording of the psychic to the police.
Stocking mask.
The cops are doubtful at first, but agree to listen to the tape. Like the student, they are impressed with what Noreen has to say.
Sister had.
Noreen told us this guy had used a stocking mask and a knife in all his rapes. All the things that the victim had told us that never were reported in the media.
Well, we were sort of in disbelief. How does she know this? Because these things weren't out.
On September 2nd, a 4th woman is raped. The victim, a young woman who was babysitting for friends. And then, a few weeks later, the rapist, wearing his trademark stocking mask, strikes again, this time a 23-year-old woman.
The public image of the Stanton Police Department plummeted. It was a worst-case scenario.
With the attacks becoming more frequent and more brazen, the cops are willing to try anything, even a psychic.
We were desperate. We wanted any help we could get.
Dabbling in the paranormal to solve a crime is not conventional police procedure.
We had no idea what we were getting into, and it was very new.
I think that when the police first agreed to work with me, they had no clues, and he kept raping, and they had no information, so they thought, what do we have to lose?
Can a psychic working with detectives help to track down a sexual predator before serial rape turns to murder?
And we looked at each other and thought, oh my gosh, well, what are we into?
In the summer of 1979, a violent sexual predator is haunting Stanton, Virginia.
We concluded that we had a serial rapist.
5 violent rapes have been committed by a mysterious masked man carrying a knife. With few leads, the police have all but hit a wall.
The public image of the Stanton Police Department plummeted. It was a worst-case scenario.
In desperation, the detectives turned to psychic Noreen Renier, who has offered to help.
I was just nervous. I had never worked with the police before.
Today, Noreen Renier is one of America's best-known psychics. But before Stanton, she had never worked with the police.
So my own concern was, will my mind be able to do what they want?
The first thing investigators do is take Noreen to the home of the third victim, the sister of the student Noreen had met.
We just let her go. Didn't say a word like, yeah, you're right, or no, you're wrong, or anything.
We didn't chat, we just went, hello, hello, and I started working.
We took Noreen to this house. About halfway up the steps, she said he came in that window right there.
The rapist had climbed into the window and had touched the banister.
Noreen's vision uncannily matches what the investigators already believe.
We'd found a ladder laying in the yard, and we came to determine that the person went in a upstairs side window. These things had never gotten out.
How could the psychic know something that hadn't been released to the public and the media?
When he opened the window, in order to get in, he just had to sort of jump to the banister.
That banister had given police the one hard piece of physical evidence they have.
I'd gotten a real good palm print where he had to grab the banister.
Walking through the home, Noreen's paranormal visions of the attack come thick and fast.
He was already waiting for her when she got home. They said, show us.
She pointed to a room and said he was waiting back in that room for the victim to come home. That was true also. Before she got to the bedroom, she said, there's some violent activity up here.
They looked at each other, but they didn't say anything. And then we walked in.
She walked in the bedroom and sat down on the bed, and she started talking as if she were the victim.
Stutters.
Noreen's description of the attack matches every detail of the victim's report. The rapist had come in the window. He had been hiding in wait. He had attacked her in her bedroom. Now, eerily, Noreen claims she has taken on the role of the victim and reveals something startling about the rapist.
He's apologizing to me. And I was so shocked. But it just was like a little scene from a movie, just that one quick little picture, and I could hear his words.
I'm sorry.
This bizarre detail that the rapist apologizes to his victims is already known to the
She was
investigators.
in a car accident and
He spoke to each victim, carried on very apologetic conversations.
And he apologized to some of the victims. It was very, very unusual.
But the psychic claims to have one more detail about the rapist.
I feel like his pants and shirt, they match. He's wearing a uniform. I could feel the material, and uniforms have a special heaviness to it. And I could tell that the pants and the shirt matched.
We were in disbelief. How does she know this? Because these things weren't out.
Noreen's first vision of the rapist suggests he's a laborer. But as she talks, she's also receiving other more cryptic psychic signals.
What I'm seeing, it seems to be going around and around.
The entire time, she would sit and talk, and she was drawing on the pad with a pencil, just drawing a perfect circle.
Noreen is sure the circles she's drawing mean something, but exactly what she can't say.
I remember first seeing him driving something. I remember knowing that whatever he drove went around and around.
She said, I have no idea what this means, but it has something to do with his occupation.
Without knowing anything, the psychic has accurately described the attacks and given the investigators a profile of the serial rapist.
There's obviously some powers at work there. It must be. And I've pretty much concluded that in my mind based upon this particular case.
Impressed with what they've learned so far, the detectives take Noreen to the home of the most recent victim.
They never told me any information, never gave me any feedback. Taking me to a second victim's house, I knew that I must be onto something.
There, she has a vision that would provide police with a vital clue. She claims to see where the rapist lives.
See this theater marquade, and I knew he lived real close. I remember feeling the brick.
Which was very interesting because there was an old theater right in the vicinity where all this was occurring. Most of these things occurred within a mile and a half, or just within 5 blocks.
Noreen has told the cops where she believes the rapist lives, but she also knows how he can be identified.
I wanted to go through his body to see if I could pick up any tattoos or scars. When I got to the knee, I could see the scar. First of all, it hurt. I remember the limping.
Pretty deep scar on his leg that would cause him a slight limp. Very new to us. We had no idea. She was getting a pretty detailed picture of this attack.
Can the psychic's cryptic clues help the police to track down a rapist who's already attacked 5 women?
And we had the information, but we didn't know what to do with it.
In the summer of 1979, a serial rapist is terrorizing the college town of Stanton, Virginia.
The police were scrambling to get an arrest in the case. There was a crisis of public confidence.
Desperate, the investigators have enlisted a psychic.
She said she was picking up energy, and she was taking on the role of this victim.
I feel theater. I knew we lived real close, and I remember feeling the brick.
She said he lived in an apartment right across from a movie theater. Brick apartment, she even stated. We did concentrate on the brick apartment building across from the movie theater.
We were in plane cars, and we had them positioned all around the city, and especially in that particular area.
The community became absolutely racked with fear. There was a tremendous need to get this case solved.
And it could have gone real bad for us.
Armed with details provided by Noreen's extraordinary psychic visions, police stake out the movie house and other key locations in Stanton and lie in wait.
We spent many sleepless nights on this case.
We would stake out till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, then come back out about 7.
Then, after 2 weeks of around-the-clock surveillance, on the evening of December 27th, a break.
Stanton Police Department.
A call came in that someone was peeking in the window.
The call comes from a woman living less than a block away from the movie house.
Ma'am, is the suspect still there? I understand, and I'll get an officer on the...
We had one of our cars sitting right near the end of that driveway.
Got a report of a person messing around the house, looking in the windows and this, that, and the other. And when he came out of the yard, it was a fenced yard he had to walk out of. When he came out of the yard, we stopped him and questioned him about his business in the area.
And something else.
He had a limp.
Could this limp be linked to the scar the psychic predicted the rapist would have on his knee?
Did you hold up for a minute?
Wasn't his home. We didn't know anyone in the home. Told us he was looking for some boxes because he was moving. He told us, start telling us a number of things that just didn't make any sense.
Got any weapons on you? Anything on you?
I think we all looked at him and said, I think we have the right guy here. I don't think there was any question.
Have the police got the right man? He does live by the theater.
From around here? Watch your head.
The peeping Tom is taken into custody without a struggle. That man is 22-year-old James Bruce Robinson of Stanton. Police charge him with attempted burglary. But is he the man responsible for raping 5 women?
We knew we had him pretty well there for an attempted B&E, but at that point we had no idea that he was the rapist.
We did get his fingerprints, and I'd gotten a good palm print, so I took his palm prints, and we took those to the lab the next day.
Then they remember one of Noreen's most detailed predictions. The rapist would have a big scar on his knee.
It's very strange to ask him to pull his pant legs up. He had no idea why we asked him that. I was so excited when he pulled his pant leg up and showed me a great big scar there. So all of these things just started coming together.
The psychic is right. But to nail Robinson, they need more. They need hard evidence.
The evidence that we had was pretty, shall I say, skimpy on each one of these sexual assaults as far as linking anything particularly to him. We had one palm print off of one of the scenes.
The investigators devise a plan. To persuade Robinson to confess, they take him to the scene of his crimes.
It was a technique I used in many criminal investigations. Put him in a car and drive him to a neighborhood.
We did a lot of running around in the car with him, asking him things as we drove by people's houses that he had visited.
And he started out making confessions to trespasses and burglaries. That's how it started.
Despite admitting to a string of burglaries, Robinson denies rape. But then, suddenly...
Sir, the lab just called back. Your palm print matches your suspect.
We got a call over the radio that the lab had called and matched that palm print. He knew exactly now that he's had it.
Confronted with the evidence, James Robinson breaks down and confesses to the rapes.
He gave the police details that only the true rapist could have known.
There's little doubt that Noreen helped police put the serial rapist behind bars. Her remarkable insights were right on almost every count. She described how the perpetrator had entered the homes, how he had apologized to his victims. She told police the suspect lived close to a theater, that he limped, and he had a scar on his knee.
This is Dixie movie theater. It's been here for years. And coincidentally, right across the street are the Woodward Apartments, and where the suspect was found to live.
And what about those puzzling circles Noreen drew?
The suspect drove cement mixer truck. He would leave the truck parked in front of the apartment or somewhere close, and he'd go in.
I must admit I was very impressed by he drives something that goes round and round, and it turned out to be a cement mixer truck. That was pretty cool.
Noreen's vision of a man in uniform is also true.
The night we picked him up, he had the shirt on.
At the trial, the prosecution paint a chilling portrait of a man driven to rape and rape again. James Bruce Robinson pleads guilty and is sentenced to 5 concurrent 20-year sentences for the Stanton rapes.
We were very impressed with Noreen and the information that she was able to give us.
It gives you a little extra something to look for, you know, when you're out on the street.
Everything that she gave came about.
And then at the very end, when I left, as they were shaking my hands, they said, "When will we catch him?" And I thought for a second, and I said, "Before Christmas."
And we got him on December 22nd.
Called me later to thank me for my Christmas present.
In 1987, when 2 teenage girls are murdered in Thunder Bay, Canada, the police fear the worst.
I immediately thought that we had a serial killer working the area.
Police think they've got their man, but a psychic says they're wrong.
I felt terrible, but I had to tell him I'm having trouble recognizing the face I see.
In the public's mind, it was going to be sort of a miracle if anybody was caught because so much time had elapsed.
Then, 13 years later, a stone-cold case comes back to life. Was the psychic right all along?
I knew I had seen that face so clearly.
On the shores of Lake Superior sits Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada. In the 1600s, a fur trading post. Today, a struggling industrial town. On Sunday, May 10th, 1987, Mother's Day, an elderly couple out on their morning walk discover the body of a young woman laying in a gravel pit. First to arrive on the scene is Constable Jerry Moran of the Ontario Provincial Police.
The body was located right in this area here. The top had been pulled up and her jeans were undone. Her shoes were removed and laid beside the body.
Police comb the scene and find a plastic bag containing a beer bottle and what appears to be the undergarments of their victim.
The thing that was going through my mind at the time was
Somebody's Mother's Day had been ruined for the rest of their lives.
But Detective Moran has a job to do and puts his personal feelings aside.
You treat it very businesslike. You're detached. Any short-lived evidence, anything that weather could destroy, we have to try to preserve that as fast as possible.
At the scene, police also find shoe prints and tire marks. The young woman is identified as 17-year-old high school student Donna Tebenham.
The body of 17-year-old Donna Tebenem was found yesterday afternoon in a gravel pit north of the city. As for details, that's about all the OPP is releasing so far.
The circumstances surrounding it dictates that we are or have forwarded the body to the Center of Forensic Sciences in Toronto for expert examination.
Donna Tebenham was your typical 16-year-old girl. You know, she went to school, she had friends.
Julio Gomes is a local journalist for the Thunder Bay Chronicle.
I've lived all my life in Thunder Bay, and at the time I was a teenager as well. And I know my own feeling was one of shock.
An autopsy reveals she died of asphyxiation. There were small traces of alcohol in her body, but no drugs. A sample of semen is also recovered. Another curious clue. Tiny specks of blue paint were lifted from her clothing.
The blue paint was at one point used on a specific year of pickup trucks. Anybody that wanted to paint their vehicle could have painted it that blue, but we had established, based on the wheelbase and the axle width, that it was a truck.
Police learned that Donna had spent the previous evening visiting friends. She was last seen walking back from a local corner store at about 11 p.m. Calls from the public kept police busy, but brought them no closer to a suspect.
We had so many suspects, or what could be considered persons of interest, but as it turned out, in all the cases, it was a dead end. People would come forward and just say that they have reason to suspect this person because they said something. They said they may have seen this girl at a party, or they said that they went to school with this girl and they've done things to this girl and things like that. They were blowhards at a party, most of them, that would just want to get attention for themselves and admit to doing anything. And all these guys were subsequently ruled out as suspects.
Another snag. Partial fingerprints found on the beer bottle at the scene turn up no matches. With no suspects, and with no DNA testing in 1987, the semen sample sat on the shelf. The most promising clue police had appeared to be the blue repaint chips found on the body, but record-keeping back then was less exact. Tracking down a blue repainted truck had to be done by sight.
In this particular case, we were looking for a travel-all, or an international travel-all truck. It's like an old Chevy Suburban. So there weren't too many of them around. So we were tracking those things down, and we spent months looking for everybody that was registered or had ever owned one of those. And so that's all time-consuming.
Thunder Bay is a small town, and there are unfortunately a lot of other unsolved murders that take place, and every couple of years you'd have someone that disappears and they're never found.
Then, Friday, August 7th, another body is spotted off the side of the road just a few miles from where Donna Tebenham was murdered 3 months earlier. The second victim is another Thunder Bay High School student, 16-year-old Bernadette Leclerc.
We were supposed to go dancing. I didn't hear from her. I knew something was wrong.
David Binquist was Bernadette Leclerc's boyfriend at the time she went missing.
And I was just happened to be flipping through the newspaper, and they had a little article about a native girl found in the power lines. My heart almost jumped out of my chest.
The crime scene appears chillingly familiar to Constable Moran.
The victims were the same age. There was no obvious signs of violent death, but there was a plastic bag put over her head.
Shoe prints and tire tracks match the Donna Tebenham scene. Police also make another key discovery.
We found blue repaint chips on both bodies. I immediately thought that we had a serial killer working the area.
Then police get a promising lead. A woman walks into the station and says she knows who the killer is. She claims her boyfriend, who we will call Ron Newman, picked up a woman at the same corner store where Donna Tebenham was last seen the night she went missing.
She was allegedly an eyewitness to the actual apprehension.
So the police questioned him, and then they arrested him. And he was charged with 2 counts of murder.
Attorney Lee Begg had been working on Ron Newman's case since the day the arrest was made. Police fingerprint Newman, but the prints don't match, and he doesn't drive a blue truck. But police aren't giving up so easily.
We couldn't rule him out as a suspect just due to the fact that his prints didn't match what was found at our scene. He could have been wearing gloves. He could very well not have touched anything.
Nobody minds defending a guilty person, but when it's an innocent person, the task becomes so much more serious because you dare not make a mistake.
And police would learn that they had made a big one. At a preliminary hearing, the OPP's case against Ron Newman falls apart.
Well, she just didn't withstand cross-examination to the extent that the Crown had absolutely nothing to go on. There was no connection between my client and the murders whatsoever.
Finally, after spending 6 months in jail, the charges are dropped.
He was released, but unhappily for him, there was no one else to point the finger at.
We weren't defeated. We were still interested in pursuing the case, albeit from a different angle.
That different angle was a psychic.
One evening I was watching a documentary that involved a woman by the name of Noreen Renier.
The use of psychics in police investigations is commonplace, but in Canada, almost unheard of. Will the psychic lead the OPP to a brutal serial killer?
I saw so clearly the face of the murderer.
In Thunder Bay, Ontario, the murder of 2 teenage girls has the city demanding answers. Police have a suspect, but not enough evidence to convict. Desperate for clues, a cop calls a psychic.
She had been successful with several American agencies, so I thought we had nothing to lose.
Noreen Renier is a psychometrist who specializes in missing persons and homicide cases.
I like touching something off the victims, and metal is better for me. It seems to be a better conduit. It holds the energy or images of what that individual saw just before he or she was killed.
Detective Moran sends her a pair of earrings found on Donna Tebenham, as well as a necklace from Bernadette Leclerc.
When I first start a case, I have to prove to the police that I'm real. And so I always tell them a few things they already know, usually how the person was killed, what he or she looked like, when they were alive, a few things like that to gain their confidence in me as a credible psychic. And then they can ask questions, and my mind just sees what they ask.
Yeah, I felt a little weird about the whole thing. I'd never been involved with a psychic. I'd never even been to a tea reader, but I figured, if it works, who am I to argue with it?
Like most of her cases, Noreen conducts her reading with Moran over the phone.
When I held Donna's earring, I remember seeing her sort of light brownish hair, and I feel she had problems with her S's. I see braces.
She described the victims very accurately, right down to the speech impediment on Tebenham and the character of Leclerc.
I had Bernadette's necklace, so it wasn't that difficult to be able to describe her. I felt more fuller lips. I felt more feisty, confident, a little bit rebellious, again young.
Then Noreen astounds Moran by describing the murder.
Remember, I couldn't breathe. Screaming. I'm having trouble breathing. Didn't feel any knives or guns or wounds of that sort, just not breathing.
It started, being a little unusual that she would know some of this stuff, and I certainly wasn't given this information to her.
Again, I closed my eyes, and I could feel, first of all, I felt a truck. And it was blue, it was low, and it had sort of a flat thing in the back of it.
I was somewhat surprised because that's the color of the vehicle we were looking for, based on the paint chips found in both scenes.
The eyes, I'm seeing the eyes now. On a face, when I close my eyes and I'm trying to describe the murderer, I don't see the whole face at one time.
But the whole face is what the police need, so Noreen sets up a circle group hoping to get a clearer picture of the killer.
I'm seeing an eye. A circle group is people with like minds. We're all hopefully trying to get the same answers. I was teaching at the time an ESP course, and some of my students had heard about the case that I was working on, and they wanted to become involved in it and help me see more. Large ears, more closer to the head. It was so clear. I saw it so clearly. I knew that if I had my artist draw it, that we would have a face for Constable Moran.
She subsequently got a hold of a sergeant from an American police force that had worked with her before, and based on her description, he drew a composite sketch of what she thought our suspect should look like.
Length. There was just a small space between the upper lip and the nose. I made a photostat copy of the sketch and sent it to Constable Moran and waited to hear what he had to say.
When I got the Polaroid picture of the composite sketch, it didn't look like anybody in particular that we had looked at.
Nothing. They didn't know who it was. I was devastated. I felt so like I was on, and he didn't know who my face was. I was just totally devastated.
It looks like another dead end. But Moran is not willing to give up just yet. He sends the psychic a stack of photos, including the photo of Ron Newman.
I didn't really recognize anyone in the lineup. I felt terrible, but I had to tell him, I'm having trouble recognizing the face I see.
At that point, I was somewhat disappointed, but I knew that there was no point in pursuing something that wasn't there.
But before the cop gives up on the psychic, he has one more question.
Will we get him, and when will we arrest him? And I said, yes, he's going to be 32 years old. He's going to have a mustache. And I saw the initial R. I didn't know if it was first or last name, but I saw R.
Moran is stumped by Noreen's clues. Ron Newman was 32 years old, and he had the letter R in his name, but the psychic sketch looks nothing like him.
The description that she made, really, it was a stretch to make it fit Newman.
The last conversation I had with Constable Moran was when he sent me the lineup of the faces, and that was the last time we spoke.
At that point, the case didn't go very much further. I was taken from the case and put back on general duties because there was no other avenues of investigation to pursue.
I questioned my ability. How could I see so clearly and it be so wrong? What was wrong? My mind, what was happening?
The case goes cold. 2 16-year-olds are dead, and their killer is still out there. Police run occasional Crime Stoppers television spots, but no new leads surface.
It always seemed like they were at a dead end, and that really in the public's mind, it was going to be sort of a miracle if anybody was caught because so much time had elapsed.
In fact, 13 years go by. Then science steps in and reignites a cold case and confirms a psychic's long-forgotten vision.
How could I be so wrong when I had seen so clearly?
In Thunder Bay, Ontario, the murder of 2 teenage girls remains unsolved. 13 years pass, and then a breakthrough in fingerprinting technology offers new hope to cold cases. In August of 2000, an automated fingerprint identification system known as APHIS was upgraded to search and retrieve both finger and palm prints of convicted felons.
This led to numerous cases being cleared up, and one of them was the Tebben LeClaire case.
Partial prints found on a beer bottle and a plastic bag at the scenes could now be compared against pools of fingerprint records. APHIS turns up a hit, and the owner of the prints is Larry Runholm. In 1990, 3 years after the murders, Larry Runholm, a native of Thunder Bay, had been arrested and charged with drinking and driving. His fingerprints were forwarded to the RCMP and remained on file for 10 years, until the new technology made the match. A case that has baffled cops for 13 years is finally solved. On July 11, 2000, Runholm is charged with the murders of Donna Tebbenham and Bernadette LeClaire.
It was a huge story when he was arrested because the community had almost forgotten about these deaths, and the few people that still remember it had almost given up any hope that anyone would ever be arrested and held to account for it.
The arrest finally vindicated a psychic who 13 years earlier accurately described both girls, their dark hair, Donna's braces, and Bernadette's feisty personality. She even envisioned their deaths.
I'm having trouble breathing.
But it was her sketch of the killer that police turned a blind eye 2 years ago that now came back to haunt them.
The profile provided by Noreen Renier regarding a suspect turned out was amazingly accurate. At the time of the murders, Mr. Runholm was only 19. We have a high school photograph, Mr. Runholm. The prominent nose, the full mouth, the length of the hair.
Other puzzling clues offered by the psychic now seemed to make sense as well.
I remember Constable Moran saying, "Will we get him, and when will we arrest him?" And I said, yes, he's going to be 32 years old. He's going to have a mustache. And I saw the initial R. I didn't know if it was first or last name, but I saw R. So I was overjoyed that my information was right. Sad that it didn't help in a timely manner.
Runholm admits to intentionally killing both girls and avoids a jury trial by pleading guilty to second-degree murder.
And Larry Runholm never took the stand, never explained anything. His lawyer said he has no memory of what happened, so he has nothing to offer.
Runholm claims he can't remember what happened back in 1987 when the girls, both 16, were believed to have been raped and then suffocated 3 months apart. But Justice Stanley Carisco, in his sentencing address, says he saw no evidence of amnesia, and he says the families deserve an explanation for these sickening murders.
You know, the guy is a vicious killer, sadistic, and the judge saw through him, and I'm very thankful for that.
To this day, the police don't know exactly what happened the nights the two girls went missing. What they do know is that both girls were suffocated with a plastic bag. DNA testing of semen taken from both girls matched Larry Runholm, and blue paint chips found on both girls matched the paint and make of the truck he drove.
Why did he do it? And how could he live with himself for the next 15 years, where ostensibly he was raising a family and leading a normal life? It's one of those just baffling things that you constantly think about and say, you know, what really happened?
His plea of second-degree murder carries an automatic life sentence.
The ruling of 20 years came as some satisfaction and closure for the families of the victims.
Second-degree murder for two girls. I would have liked to have seen, 22, if not a little bit more. But I am pleased it's over.
There was a certain amount of uncertainty that we had stepping in here today and just wondering where the judge was going to end up. So at 20 years, I think my sister was well served.
Look at how many lives he's destroyed. I don't think he got what he deserves. But I know he'll get what he deserves where he's going.
If the police had used the psychic's sketch in their investigation, would the murders have been solved sooner? An article published a few weeks after Runholm's arrest revealed that police did have him in their sights, but he was somehow overlooked.
He had lived on a road with his parents, and his parents were away all summer at a tourist camp, which they ran. And so he had the run of the house, came and went as he pleased. His house was on the same route that myself and my partner did a door-to-door knock on. And as it happens that the one side of the road that my partner was on was the same house that Mr. Runholm lived in. And he wasn't home the two times we went there. But at that point, we had no reason to suspect Mr. Runholm of anything. He was just another name to be cleared.
The police just using me is right, but they are not used to working with psychics, so they don't understand how we work and how they have to interpret our clues. It's not all factual the way in this reality. My goal, and still will be till it happens, is to train and teach the detectives how to do what I can do.
In hindsight, the clues that Miss Renier provided, although we were disappointed that we weren't able to successfully charge suspect number one, it did prove to be very accurate for suspect number two, although 13 years down the road. I'm glad I used the psychic because sort of opens up a whole new avenue of investigation. We had nothing to lose by using her and everything to gain.
How dare I had doubted my own psychic ability. So yes, I was joyful in knowing that my ability was working and does work. And again, like fate, don't doubt, believe.
A lazy summer day at the lake turns to panic.
I said, "Where's Tom?"
When a 5-year-old boy disappears.
I wondered if he was dead.
Police think he's drowned, but a local psychic says he's lost in the forest.
I could see this little boy lying under a very large tree.
Is the psychic right? Is Tommy Kennedy alive or dead? Empire Lake in picturesque upstate New York, a favorite spot to spend a summer afternoon, especially in the mid-70s.
It was a place where people could go and relax, or bring their picnic lunches and have a nice time.
But for Mary Kennedy, Empire Lake brings back memories of a day she will never forget. On a hot summer day in 1975, Mary Kennedy and her family head to Empire Lake to spend the day swimming.
My fiance and his 2 daughters, Siri and Lisa, and my 2 sons, Ben and Tom, we decided to go down to the lake and give the children a chance to cool off.
After swimming, Fred takes the kids for a nature walk.
It was all 4 of the children. I really don't remember why I didn't go.
Fred and the kids disappear into the woods.
While everyone was hiking, I was lying on the blanket, enjoying the day. Knowing me, I probably had a book with me.
But that enjoyment was about to end.
I see Fred and the children coming towards me. Everybody was sweaty and happy, and I don't see Tom.
Tommy is Mary's youngest son. He's 5 years old.
I felt a moment of panic. Fred comes up to me and I say, "Where's Tom?" And Fred says, "I sent him back to you."
Fred says Tom wasn't wearing shoes, and he complained his feet were hurting.
I sent him back to you just at the beginning of our trip. He was whiny and didn't seem to want to do the walk, and so I sent him back to you. He thought that Tom was more competent than he was. I would not have done that. Oh my God. Where's my child? I remember just jumping up and starting to run around the lake, screaming for him.
They search frantically, backtracking their walk. Perhaps he's just hiding.
He was like a little imp, liked to play tricks on people, or always busy doing something, building tree houses, exploring the fields. He was delightful.
But after 2 hours, no sign of Tommy. To add to their concern, a thunderstorm is moving in. They realize it's time to call the police.
By the time I arrived, Tommy had probably been missing 2 or 3 hours. It was probably somewhere around 4 or 5 o'clock by that time.
Dave Redsiger was a member of the local emergency squad in Spencer.
What we did was contacted all the surrounding fire departments.
I remember standing there and Seeing the emergency vehicles beginning to arrive right down on the lawn. You know, they just bypassed the parking lot and they were setting up a command center down there on the lawn. It seemed like every car had a two-way radio going.
He's wearing a white t-shirt and a pair of plaid shorts.
I remember just regular people beginning to arrive. People standing in groups and being briefed and being told where to go.
Nobody seemed to see him around the campsite. Nobody's seen him around the swim area. So you kind of narrow it down to two areas, the woods or the lake.
I look over and they're bringing boats in. And that only means one thing.
A dive team goes into the water to search for Tommy.
Near the camping area was heavily dead woods, a lot of stumps, things that, you know, if somebody got in there, they could very easily get entangled underneath the water and not be able to get back to the surface.
And I was just horrified. I was absolutely horrified. And I just wouldn't look at them. Absolutely didn't want to look at them.
The dive team searches the perimeter of the lake, but no sign of Tommy. The storm is getting worse.
Once the weather started to get bad and the lightning started getting pretty nasty, we had to call off the water search.
4 hours had passed since 5-year-old Tom went missing.
And by that time, it was pouring. It was just torrential. And I'm thinking about this little 5-year-old kid with a bathing suit on, out there in the cold rain, in the woods somewhere. And I'm just so scared for him.
8 miles away, in the town of Spencer, 25-year-old psychic Phil Jordan hears the news.
I ran across the backyard, and my landlord was standing in the back door, and she said a little boy was missing up at Empire Lake. She says they think he's in the lake and that he is drowned.
But out of nowhere, the psychic has a vision. He can see little Tommy.
I could see this little boy lying under a very large tree. That showed me that he was probably in the woods and probably not in the lake.
Is Tommy Kennedy still alive, lost in the woods? Is the psychic right? And will anyone listen? In upstate New York, a massive search is underway at Empire Lake for 5-year-old Tommy Kennedy, who vanished during a family picnic.
This little 5-year-old kid out there in the cold rain. And I'm just so scared for him.
The storm gets worse and day turns to night.
We really started getting some nasty storm weather coming in, and it blew in quite heavy. A lot of rain. And of course with that we got a lot of thunder and lightning, and it got quite cold.
The missing boy's father, Don Kennedy, a local reporter, arrives 8 hours after his son disappeared.
He had been out of town and he had rushed to the lake.
Don begins frantically searching for his son, but now there's a new danger.
With the lightning and the thunder, we were really afraid of ending up with, more searchers lost besides the boy.
Redsicker has no choice. He calls off the search.
Intellectually, I understood, but my little 5-year-old is out there still by himself.
Tommy's parents are desperate. Don Kennedy remembers a piece he'd written about a local psychic. By coincidence, it's Phil Jordan.
My 5-year-old child was lost. As far as I was concerned, bring in the National Guard. Bring in anyone who will help search for him and find him.
I was not surprised that he called me. I felt that I might hear from some of the family. He was really pleading. He wanted me to come up to the lake at that time.
The psychic says he can help to find the missing boy, but not just yet.
I just knew that if I went there, I would become contaminated with everyone else's ideas and not follow my own self, my own psychic self. I remember saying to Don Kennedy, I'm really sorry, but I just can't come right now. I have to wait till daylight because I don't want to miss a clue that could help us to find him.
With the search called off, and the psychic refusing to come to the lake until daybreak, Mary Kennedy is losing hope.
I'm wondering if he's cold, wondering if he's scared. I wondered if he was dead.
But back in Spencer, psychic Phil Jordan is already on the case.
I sometimes leaf through the Bible and just point to something. And there was a phrase, and it said something about the children going into the woods.
Suddenly, the psychic has a vision of exactly where to find Tommy. Although he's never been to Empire Lake, he begins to draw a map.
The first thing I knew was that down to my left, there would be 3 boats. And then I could see the building across the lake. And I knew I would have to go into the woods behind the building till we find a clearing. So I drew that all on the map.
But can this crudely drawn map lead to Tommy Kennedy? It's 5 a.m. The storm is over. Tommy Kennedy has been missing an agonizing 16 hours.
No parent should have to spend a night like that. I don't remember whether we ate supper, what we said to each other. It's blank.
Hundreds of volunteers from miles around gather at dawn to resume the search.
There were several fire trucks with personnel on them, at least 1 ambulance. We got the people together, told them what the boy's name was, and then had them search areas around the lake into the wooded areas, but we concentrated on the area immediately around the camping area and the bathing, swimming area.
I was just tremendously grateful that all these people just showed up.
Psychic Phil Jordan also arrives at the lake to help with the search.
I met Dave Redsicker, who was a friend of mine, but was the investigator in charge. Even I says, well, I have this map.
I was shocked. As simple as the map was, the things that he had drawn on the map were right there.
The 3 boats were there, exactly as I had drawn. And across, you could see a large tent. And I said, that has to be the building. We'll go in behind the tent.
But the searchers think he's wrong.
And what he was describing was an area that we hadn't searched yet, because it was an area that we figured was the most remote area or most unlikely area that this child would have gotten into.
But the psychic is confident his map will lead to the lost boy. Before he begins his search, the psychic makes an unusual request.
He asked me for an article of clothing that belonged to Tom. So I asked Phil Jordan if one of his little sneakers would be okay, and Phil said, absolutely.
His mom made sure I had that sneaker, and I tucked that into my belt, and I focused on Tommy Kennedy and finding him.
250 rescuers searched the south side of Empire Lake, the area closest to the spot where Tommy was last seen. Meanwhile, Phil Jordan and 2 volunteers, armed only with a psychic map and a little boy's shoe, head in the opposite direction.
There was myself and these 2 men that I didn't know.
I just wished them good luck, and they headed out into the woods.
25-year-old Phil Jordan has never tested his psychic powers in a life-and-death situation before, and he's never been to Empire Lake. But he has faith in his map.
I know we're going to find him, and we will find him within an hour.
Tommy!
Every little ways I would stop, and I'd say to myself, okay, we have to keep going straight. Now we have to turn left.
Tommy!
Now we have to go up here. We have to go a little bit to the right. And I remember talking to myself through the whole thing so I could block out any of the ideas that others had.
Tommy, Tommy!
It was rugged terrain. There was a hiking path, but it was uphill. A lot of woods, a lot of trees falling across the path, and treacherous going.
Is it possible that a 5-year-old without shoes could have strayed so far? The psychic is now deep in the woods, 2 miles from where Tommy Kennedy disappeared. And so far, the psychic has turned up nothing. And now, one of the 2 men with him is starting to have doubts.
One of them kept saying, everything you're describing is in another direction.
Yet hundreds of volunteers searching in the area where he should be can't find a trace of Tommy either.
Nothing. It was as if Tom had just vanished.
The psychic struggles to keep his vision.
And that's when I would refer to the map and hold on to his sneaker and say, Tommy, I'm coming, I'm gonna find you.
But now even the psychic starts to doubt his map.
I was all ready to say, well, maybe we should check that other area and come back here later today.
And then Phil Jordan makes a startling discovery. On the shores of Empire Lake in upstate New York, Mary Kennedy waits desperately for any news of her 5-year-old son, Tommy, who's been missing for over 16 hours.
It was as if Tom had just vanished.
Hundreds of searchers comb the area around the lake where the boy disappeared, but with no luck. Yet 2 miles away, psychic Phil Jordan, following his crude map, has stumbled across a child's footprint.
It was right in front of me. I looked at that footprint and I thought, oh, we must be close, and I got goosebumps, you know.
That footprint convinces the psychic he's on the right track.
I said to the other searchers, now we have to find a clearing. It shouldn't be too far up here. So we continued on, and within moments we found the clearing. I just stood at the opening of the clearing and said to myself, okay, now which way do I have to go? I looked at it sort of as a clock, and I thought, we've got to go where the 11 is. And we went to that area, and there was another path through the woods.
As he climbs a gully, Phil falls behind the other searchers, but he can still hear them calling out Tommy's name. And then, an answer.
Help me! I'm over here!
I woke up to the sound of people calling my name. I started screaming, I'm over here, I'm over here.
The fellow who tried to talk me into going in the other direction, he says, I hear him yelling. He's yelling for help. And so they all ran in the direction that the voice came from.
I saw these men coming towards me with huge smiles on their face. I was very relieved that they had found me. Everybody was giving Phil Jordan congratulations. I could tell right away that he was the one that was responsible for locating me.
I just dropped there and knelt there and thanked God that he had given me this ability and cried. You know, I just sobbed. It was very emotional. He was worried that he had done wrong. He was worried that he was going to be reprimanded. And it was quite the opposite. Everybody was so thankful.
Tommy Kennedy had been missing more than 16 hours. One of the searchers reminds Phil about a prediction he had made.
He says, 58 minutes. And I says, what does that mean? And he says, you told me we'd find him within an hour, and it was 58 minutes after we started.
Tommy's rescuers carry him out to a nearby road.
They had walkie-talkies and they radioed for help, and soon the ambulance came to a road that was not far from where Tommy actually was.
And the news that Tommy is safe is radioed back to the lake.
Someone comes up to me and tells me that Tom has been found. It's like heaven opened up. I was just so grateful. Then almost instantly, there he is.
After almost 2 days of anguish, mother and son are reunited.
He says, I was camping, Mom. I slept next to a stick. It's a miracle. It's a miracle that he's found, and it's a miracle that he's okay.
Phil Jordan's visions had been right from the beginning. Tommy Kennedy hadn't gone near the lake. Instead, he had wandered deep into the forest.
I immediately started crying and whining as I was walking back, and I'm sure that contributed to me getting lost. I Probably wasn't paying attention to the marks on the path. I just started running in circles, and within a very short period of time, the clouds rolled in. And that first lightning bolt came down. Then I was terrified, and I started running and running and running.
Wet, scared, and exhausted, he remembered what his mother had taught him.
I taught my children standard safety, which is you don't go near the water when there's lightning. Find a sheltered place.
I came upon a sort of a clearing, and I found a nice large stick to fend off any attacking animals.
Phil had marked just such a clearing on his map.
I was completely exhausted by that time, so I didn't have any trouble at all falling asleep.
How could a psychic with a crudely drawn map succeed where 250 rescuers failed?
If it hadn't been for Phil, and his map and his abilities, we either wouldn't have found him for a long time or we may not have found him at all.
I'm certain that Phil Jordan saved Tom's life.
Word that Phil Jordan had found a lost boy using his psychic abilities is big news. Even the local sheriff, who is not in the habit of using the paranormal, recognizes his achievement.
And he says, I would like you to become deputized so that if we have other cases, you can work more freely with law enforcement.
So help me God.
At that time, Phil was the only deputized psychic that I was aware of in New York State.
Phil Jordan's amazing accomplishment at Empire Lake paved the way for psychics all over America to team up with police in solving difficult cases.
It was truly an honor to be deputized because at that time in history, psychics were just beginning to be used a little bit in police work.
It's now 32 years since psychic Phil Jordan found little Tommy Kennedy lost in the woods. They haven't seen each other since. Until today.
Good to see you. Well,
Phil still has the shoe that helped him to find Tommy so long ago.
I put it in my belt, and I'd say, okay, Tommy, tell me where you are. Do you remember that day?
I do. I remember running through the woods. I remember the lightning. I remember finding a stick to sleep with.
seeing
I
the
remember.
wild bear.
Exactly. Yeah, like my 5-year-old with a stick is going to do something
That's
to
right,
a bear.
That's right.
But
well, you were using your head.
Yeah.
That's the best way you knew how.
Right. Yeah. And the next thing I remember is hearing you guys. I heard you calling for me and waking up.
It was that day that I proved my ability to myself. And from then on, no one's ever convinced me that I can't do what I do.
Without him, they might have been looking for my bones,